Basarios.
Compared to Gravios? Yeah, Ruby Basarios is definitely harder.
Really?
Well, rubies are a harder material than rock, so obviously.
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, it's time to get hard.
Talk about hard monsters. Specifically now that we've had Monster Hunter Wilds, we've played through it entirely, and we've also had some time afterwards to let everything sort of settle in. I wanted to do an updated list of the hardest monsters in the series, in my own personal opinion, with a few specific rules to make it fun. First, we are only sticking to the monsters from mainline games, so while I have ranked the difficulty of frontier monsters in the past, they won't be in the running today. Second, I won't be counting temporary states, meaning any uniquely difficult version of a monster that isn't something consistent that doesn't go in like your field guide or things like that. Things like tempered, arch-tempered, frenzied, that type of stuff I will not be counting. But things like subspecies, variants, deviants, risen monsters, all of that does count because they are officially considered their own separate monster on all official lists. So arch-tempered Raydao is not in consideration, but regular Raydao could be if I did think he was hard enough. That said, for specific things like deviants and risen monsters, I will limit myself to only one of each on the list, because those are mechanics meant to create endgame difficulty, and if I didn't have those limits, the list would be almost entirely risen monsters and deviants. So only one of each of those categories, and then the final rule is that I will only count the most recent version of any given monster. For example, Blanganga. I think it's fair to say that Blanganga was probably more challenging in the old games than he is in Wilds, but I will only be considering his Wilds version as it is his most updated one, the one that the devs have recently been able to create and put the most amount of effort into, and that will count for all other monsters as well. With all that said, before we get into the actual numbered entries, a fun note here, as this is my personal top 10, while this list is being done after playing Wilds, there is not a single Wilds monster on the actual lists. I think there are some fights with a bit of challenge to them, but for the most part they are tempered and arch-tempered. I don't think any base monster in the game is within my top 10 of this list, and while some people may try and twist those words into a comment on the difficulty of Wilds, not a single monster on this list today was a monster from a base Monster Hunter game. They are, every single one of them, either from expansions, title updates, or are a remade version of the original monster from a previous game. All that said, I do want to start with an honorable mention of the one Wilds monster that I would include if I had to pick one from Wilds, which is Zoshia. Just the numbers relative to hunters are pretty hefty compared to the rest of Wilds as well. He's got quite a lot of health, which gives more opportunities to make mistakes, and while he has a lot of learnable attacks that you can actually turn to your advantage once you understand them, if you don't treat his mechanics with respect, which you often won't be able to until you know them, he'll just throw you onto a cart extremely quickly and often repeatedly. Overall, I don't think he's crazy hard in the grand scheme of the Monster Hunter series, but he definitely is the hardest monster in Wilds, at least based on the rules I'm going with today. Next up, in 10th place, we have Lunastra, and for clarity, this is Iceborne's Master Rank Lunastra. Pretty much the entirety of this list is based on my own personal opinions of difficulty from my own experiences playing thousands and thousands of hours of Monster Hunter over the years, and Lunastra is one that I have on this list, at least partially because of her reputation more than my own experiences. I think she is one of the more challenging monsters, but I've always gotten the impression that other people view her as much harder than I do myself, with the main reasons being her heat aura, and especially the way that her flames echo and chain off of the fiery patches that she leaves on the ground. And in that sense, she is absolutely a challenging monster because she requires you to have more spatial awareness than other monsters do, and to make these sort of calculations in your head to work out just how the flames are going to travel and things like that to help you get out of stuff like the supernova. But outside of that, honestly, I think she's just a perfect 10th place slot fit on the list. Not quite so challenging that she was an instant inclusion for me, but definitely challenging enough that having her here does feel right. Moving up to 9th place then, I've got Dire Morales from Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. I won't pretend that I was good at Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. I didn't play it enough for me to consider myself good at it. My experience with it was basically playing through it over the course of a couple of weeks. I didn't do a massive amount of grinding, basically just the amount to make it comfortable going from one monster to the next, because for the most part, the reason I was playing it at the time that I did was to experience the monsters that were unique to that game. game, and of course to experience underwater combat. Dire Morales specifically has an absolute buttload of health, he fires off meteors in random directions, he does a ton of damage, and there's just a certain clunkiness to the fight, even outside of underwater combat as well. And it's something that is definitely more prevalent in older generation siege fights within Monster Hunter, but usually I do find old siege fights to just be sort of slow more than anything, whereas Dire Morales felt actually hard in my opinion. In 8th place then, I've got Behemoth, who is a crossover monster, but still technically on the official monster list, so he does count. The hardest version of this creature by far was Extreme Behemoth, but I'm not counting singular quest monster variations, so this is just for regular Behemoth. He was still no slouch though. He has an attack that targets tornadoes on you, and then they will stick on the place where they go for ages afterwards, so you have to manage the space around you and make sure that you put the tornadoes in places you won't want to stand afterwards. He has a varied moveset with high damage attacks and tons of AoE, and then he has Ecliptic Meteor, which was the first time that the devs messed with the sort of hide behind a thing or you get one shot style of mechanic, and this has become a bit of a staple in difficult fights in Monster Hunter after this. The thing that made it even harder though was that the comets, which were the only real safety you had from the meteor, were able to be broken by Behemoth's attacks. So you have to manage the tornadoes and put them in the safest places, you have to put the comets down in places that are easy for you to get to when you need to, but not so close to the fight that they get hit by the monster and then break. And it just created this very involved hunting experience overall that required just sort of keeping track of a lot of things in the back of your head. In 7th place, I have Raging Brachydios, and this is counting his Iceborne title update version. If we look purely at damage output and base moveset, Raging Brachydios isn't crazy difficult, but there are two really big things that bump him up here for me. The first is the reactive slime. The fact that his slime reacts to you being near it, even when he is downed on the ground flailing around, makes it much harder to actually defeat him. Usually the biggest bursts of damage that hunters can do are when you get a knockdown or some sort of immobilization on a monster, but with Raging Brachydios, when you get those moments, you cannot actually commit to a long combo properly because the slime will explode before the monster stands back up, which means that a lot of weapons don't get to use their strongest attacks against him anywhere close to as much as they can with other monsters. It takes away the easy damage openings. The second major thing is the final phase, in which he locks you in the room with him so you can't get out of it anymore, and then he just goes absolutely berserk, and it's basically either you die or he dies. And there are plenty of times where I've seen Raging Brachydios come out as the victor of that fight. Up in 6th place, I have Primordial Malzeno, the final update monster of the Sunbreak expansion, and this is an absolutely nutty variation on Malzeno. His damage numbers were absolutely through the roof, his raw speed is incredibly hard to deal with, and more than either of those was just his combo length for the new combos. He has some absolutely obscenely long combos with lots of movement inside of them too, and these three things combined made him an absolute menace, which is quite fitting for his spot as the final update monster for his game. And the best part of it is that this is an example of difficulty done right. He is hard as hell, but it's an enjoyable kind of hard rather than the frustrating kind, because all he's asking you to do is make the most out of the tools that you've been working with and practicing with for the entire game. In fact, because of this, he sort of reminds me a fair bit of the next entry. In 5th place, I've got Elatrion, which means his Iceborne version specifically. Iceborne's Elatrion's initial wall is just convincing people to use element weapons, which I don't count for difficulty really, but then even moving past that, I think he is one of the more difficult fights that we've ever had from his raw moveset. It has a lot of variance, of course, the being split between all of the elements he has access to, it means that he has a lot of different ways of coming at you, and you will have to learn all of these different attacks. He can apply multiple different blights to you at the same time, and importantly, he can apply Dragon Blight quite frequently, and Dragon Blight disables your ability to do elemental damage, which then means that you can't stop Eschaton Judgment from murdering everyone, but of course, Null Berries are a massive counter to that, just as the Astera Jerky is a bit of a counter to Eschaton Judgment in itself, But the thing is that these are items, they're consumables, and consumables are pretty much always considered optional ways to make fights easier. Whereas in this fight, I'd say that you absolutely want to have them. I don't even really consider them optional. Is it physically possible to beat the quest without these? Sure, absolutely, it is, but you're just sort of shooting yourself in the foot if you don't bring them and don't use them. And that in itself, aside from his moveset being quite punishing, makes him a step above most monsters as far as I'm concerned. Moving on to 4th place, we have Abyssal Legac. I mentioned my time playing through Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate earlier, and I think the most difficult experience I had was against Abyssal Legac. And I want to be clear that I think if this fight was on land, of course it wouldn't really make sense, but if it just had the smoothness of hunting on land, it might not even be in the top 10 at all. But this fight to me is the epitome of the clunkiness of underwater hunting, a system that I deeply enjoyed as a concept, and I enjoyed getting to interact with going back in time to play this game much after it was originally released, but I found underwater hunting just absolutely unwieldy. It was so strange to just try and hunt through, and my experience with this fight specifically and my thoughts on the difficulty of this monster are almost entirely based around him just being the most challenging version of underwater combat, and underwater combat itself being something that I consider to be difficult. In 3rd place then, we have Bloodbat Diablo as my entry for deviant monsters from Generations Ultimate. This monster is insanely difficult. The damage it puts out is nuts, even on the non-ridiculously upgraded version. Its health pool is quite vast, but the big thing for me is its speed, its combos, and mostly the general flow of the fight. The moveset in general is quite dangerous and punishing, don't get me wrong, but the way that this fight is designed, the more damage that you put into Bloodbat Diablo, the faster it will get, the more damage it will do, the more dangerous it will get. And this is before the infinite healing restocks that we had in 5th generation games onwards, so this is a monster that truly tested your ability to play well when it counts, to avoid damage over a long period of time and not get too content and let it just sort of rush over you when you aren't paying attention. Because if you use all of your resources just getting it down to the last 30% of the health bar, that last 30% is going to kick your ass about 7 different ways. Moving on to 2nd place then, we have Risen Crimson Glow Valstrax, who is our one Risen monster entry for the list, and I think that he absolutely deserves it. His damage is incredibly high because he is a special state monster placed at pretty much the top of the food chain. He got even faster than his non-risen version, which is sort of crazy to say considering this is a Valstrax. He got crazier combos like the double laser beam, and I think he was designed with some specific timings that were built to counter wirefall. Wirefall being the mechanic in the game where you could use a wirebug charge to pick yourself up off of the ground with iframes and a bunch of movement, which is something that you're sort of trained to do most times that you get hit. But some monsters, like this one, just have attack timings that are built to punish you if you wirefall, instead of just waiting to get up the standard way, which is in itself pretty difficult because it goes against what you've been taught to do in most fights within the game. Then finally today we have Fatalis, and this is of course Iceborne final title update Fatalis, and I just don't think anything truly compares to him. Mechanically speaking, there is a fair bit going on here, and of course once you understand how to deal with his big flame breaths and how those work, and once you understand the need to destroy his horns before he progresses to later phases, the fight does get much easier. But even if you do those things, he still has incredibly high damage, he still has massive AoE, he has fantastic projectile tracking against you while running, long combos as well, and of course while you can fight it in a group, I am counting these as solo fights for the sake of comparison, and I think fighting Fatalis solo can be quite rough, unless of course you manage to loop him into doing his flamethrower cone attack on repeat. But as I mentioned with Primordial Malzeno earlier, I think Fatalis is another example of a very, very difficult fight, but done extremely well, by which I mean that it doesn't feel bullshit to me in any way. It's tight, it's tough, it's challenging, but it's totally beatable, and anytime I fail, I can look back at the fight and understand why it happened and what I might have been able to do differently to avoid it. That just about does it for today then, everyone. A list of the top 10 hardest monsters in mainline Monster Hunter, at least from my own personal opinions and experiences. I hope you've enjoyed this, and of course feel free to leave your own thoughts on the hardest monsters in the series down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.